Hello and welcome back to Football Daily, where today we're running through 10 clubs that have done amazing work during this current situation. This is obviously not a competition, and we won't be able to cover every club's work, but there are some great stories here nonetheless. And before we get started, it's worth pointing out that any footage or photos of players or groups together in this video are from before the lockdown, and it's important that you stick to the government's ruling of social distancing during this difficult time. Now let's get into the video. West Ham United. While the West Ham hierarchy have often found themselves getting criticised for decisions they've made in the past, especially by their own fanbase, the London club have earned a lot of praise for their response to the lockdown, which has brought the majority of people's lives to a standstill in the UK. Captain Mark Noble led the way. 4 days before the country went into lockdown, he paid tribute to doctors, nurses and other key workers in his column in the Evening Standard, before pledging to donate his season earnings from the column to the local Newham food bank. Noble also spoke about the need to help the elderly and vulnerable, and the club have worked to support members of Any Old Irons, a group made up of Hammers fans over the age of 65, with Declan Rice and others reaching out to them over the phone. Then in April, the East London club became the second Premier League outfit to announce their players would be taking pay cuts in order to subsidise the full wages of non-playing staff. David Moyes, Karen Brady and Finance Director Andy Mollett also revealed they would be taking 30% wage cuts, with owners David Gold and David Sullivan, along with other shareholders, injecting an extra £30 million into the club to aid the initiative. Roma. As touched upon in the previous section, the elderly are among the most vulnerable people during this pandemic, and this has been particularly true in Italy, one of the worst affected countries and a nation with an especially large elderly population. That's why Roma have reached out to their older supporter base, delivering care packages to all their season ticket holders over the age of 75. The packages contain essentials like pasta, hand sanitizer and protective gloves, but also special treats like beer and a copy of beloved paper Gazzetto dello Sport. Roma's oldest fan, 96-year-old Aliso Lonzetti, who was born 4 years before the club was even established, also received a signed Edin Dzeko shirt. Meanwhile, the club have also teamed together to help local hospitals, buying 3 ventilators, 8 intensive care beds, and distributing nearly 30,000 surgical masks. Nice. Loneliness is an issue which affects thousands of elderly people at the best of times, with many living on their own, and this has only been worsened by the global health crisis, with families unable to visit their relatives and friends unable to drop in on vulnerable neighbours. Because of this, video calling has become an essential way for people to keep in touch with their loved ones, and Nice manager Patrick Vieira has taken it upon himself to donate 250 iPads to 4 care homes in the city, helping residents to stay connected with their families during the lockdown. The former Arsenal captain has also been outspoken in his dislike for discussing when football will restart during this time, saying everyone should be fully focused on helping each other get through the crisis first and foremost. The club has also been proactive, distributing hand sanitizer and protective gear to frontline workers, donating essentials to food banks, and encouraging fans to give blood, which is in high demand during the pandemic. PSG. Meanwhile, up in Paris, the facilities at the Parc des Princes are being put to good use, while Di Maria, Neymar and MBappé are no longer gracing its turf. PSG's 48,000-seater stadium is unsurprisingly home to a number of kitchens, which are being utilised in a project funded by the sale of over 1,000 limited edition Parisian shirts. Up to 1,200 meals are being prepared each day, and are delivered by volunteers to health workers and general staff across the city's hospitals in food trucks which would otherwise be used on match days. It's expected that 25,000 meals will be delivered in total as part of the initiative. But hopefully it won't end there. With health workers across the world under increasing amounts of pressure, one of the globe's richest clubs will no doubt be expected to continue providing for the local community. Southampton. At the beginning of April, Southampton set the precedent for the rest of the Premier League, becoming the first English top-flight club to confirm they would be deferring part of their players' salaries in order for non-playing staff to carry on receiving their full wage. Manager Ralph Hasenhüttl, his coaching team and the club's board of directors are also seeing their pay reduced, and it means the Saints will not have to rely on taxpayer money to subsidise pay for their workers. While the Professional Footballers Association have argued that players taking a pay cut could in turn hurt tax contributions to the NHS, the club is nevertheless protecting staff who may otherwise have struggled during the crisis. Like PSG, the club have also prepared thousands of meals for those in need. And they are also using their online presence constructively, broadcasting special Saints at Home interviews with club ambassadors and providing live entertainment through their esports team. Meanwhile, the club's psychology department have also published an introduction to mindfulness to help members of the community who may be struggling with their mental health. Bournemouth. Fellow South Coasters Bournemouth are also making a big effort to stay connected with fans during the crisis, and specifically those deemed at risk. As soon as the lockdown was announced, the English club made their own announcement, pledging to reach out to its vulnerable and socially isolated supporters. Members of the club's ticketing staff are keeping in contact with said fans over the phone, checking up on their situation as well as having conversations about the club and reminiscing about their favourite moments as a Cherries fan. According to the club, these fans are also taking part in a weekly AFC Bournemouth quiz. Meanwhile, manager Eddie Howe became the first top-flight coach to announce he would be taking a pay cut, while the club eventually reversed its decision to furlough non-playing staff. Manchester City. Top clubs and footballing figures in the UK have rallied round in the last month to help the country's health service in the struggle against COVID-19, with notable examples including Chelsea FC and Gary Neville opening up their hotels for NHS workers to live in for free during the crisis. The Blues are also providing 13,000 meals a week to health workers and charities which look after the elderly and vulnerable. And like PSG, Manchester City are making use of their own stadium, giving the NHS access to the Etihad, with executive boxes and conference rooms understood to be available for training doctors and nurses during the crisis. Down in Cardiff, this has been taken to a new level, with the Principality Stadium being used as a field hospital with 2,000 beds. Meanwhile, Man City manager Pep Guardiola, who sadly lost his mother to the virus, has donated €1 million to help the effort in his native Spain. Union Berlin. When the coronavirus crisis struck Germany, FC Union Berlin were 9 games off completing their first ever season in the Bundesliga, and were having a good time of it too. They currently sit in 11th place, 12 points above the automatic relegation spots, and have beaten Dortmund and Mönchengladbach at home this term. But for a club of Union's stature, a long-term postponement of this nature has the potential to cause serious financial damage, with club president Dirk Zingler suggesting the club's very existence could be at stake. The players and coaching staff have totally waived their salaries, meaning they won't get paid at all during the lockdown, and this move has also been made at Borussia Mönchengladbach in order to protect the livelihoods of non-playing staff. But with any luck, it won't have to go on for too long. At the time of writing, Bundesliga officials are growing more confident that the competition can be resumed behind closed doors as early as May. This would mean the current season will be completed and the 2020-21 campaign may be able to kick off sooner rather than later, giving clubs vital assurances over television revenue. Bundesliga big boys. And this sense of cooperation in Germany hasn't just been limited to Union and Mönchengladbach. One of the first football federations to take decisive action during this crisis, the German FA has been a shining light for many, and their biggest institutions have played their part too. In March, Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund, RB Leipzig and Bayern Leverkusen set up a €20 million solidarity fund to help clubs in the top 2 tiers of German football stay afloat during the crisis, with much of the money coming from the 4 clubs foregoing their share of national media revenue. But this isn't wholly surprising. The German game is community-driven by its very nature, with Dortmund themselves helped out by Bayern when they faced financial difficulties back in 2005. Meanwhile, Robert Lewandowski is one of a number of Bundesliga stars to give personally to fight against COVID-19, with him and his wife Anna donating €1 million. With modern football all too often seeing smaller clubs suffer from the huge financial success of the game's giants, Germany has led the way for how the sport should be supported during these tough times. Just a week later, the Premier League announced it would be donating £125 million to clubs between the 2nd and 6th tiers of English football. Small clubs. And finally, we want to shout out all the small clubs continuing to do amazing work despite being hit the hardest by the global health crisis. Just last week, reports suggested some clubs in the English Football League were just days away from going bust, with uncertainty over the ending of the season and players' contracts, or there's even been talk of a £1 billion bailout from an international consortium. But even in these uncertain times, smaller clubs remain a big part of their communities and still act as such. Non-league sides such as Hampton and Richmond Borough are continuing to run their food banks, and have even stepped up their voluntary work by doing shopping runs and collecting medical prescriptions for vulnerable locals. Meanwhile, Oldham Athletic have set up an initiative delivering fresh fruit and veg for free to elderly members of the community, and Forest Green Rovers have offered up their stadium for the NHS to use during the crisis. These are just a few examples of how small clubs, many of which are in areas that have been neglected in the best of times, are continuing to serve their communities the best way they can. And that's all we have time for today, but if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more great content. And finally, in these difficult times, please do remain indoors, wash your hands and stay safe. Bye for now.